Chris, what do you think about Auburn, what they're going to be doing this year?
I'm just not very high on these guys, dude, this year. I'm just not. I think they'll be competitive. I think that they're a team, man. Like, to me, it's like, I don't know how to put it, Christian. I want to hear your thoughts actually here, because like Auburn, just to me, like, I know they're going to play Bama tough, right? I mean, they always fucking do. It doesn't matter to the record, but like, they don't have Cam Newton. Bo Nix is gone. He's been to Oregon for a few years now. Like, I just don't know like where they're really headed. And Auburn, for the most of my lifetime, has always been like a top 20 team. And it's almost like I just don't feel like, who's their coach right now? Sorry, I hate to break that up. Or
Hugh Freeze.
Yes, and he's a good kid. He's a good coach, but it just feels like Auburn, like the last couple of years, has just been very, I don't know, kind of under the radar. Don't seem like they have a lot of national relevancy most of the time. I just feel like they're on unstable ground right now. I guess that's the words I will use. I'm not giving a prediction right now. I'm sure we'll go through that, but like, I just don't. I don't know. Something about Auburn, dude, just very, very mediocre. Christian, I don't know if that pisses you off. I like to hear your thoughts. I know you're a stat whore, but I just don't really feel like in the SEC and in these times what they're really kind of trying to do with the newer coach and just trying to establish something. I don't really know what the fuck Auburn really is. I'll leave it at that, man.
Listen, Chris, I think you're exactly right. I don't think anybody fucking knows what Auburn's going to be this year. I mean, they're kind of like a little bit like Colorado, if you will, right? They're bringing in a shit ton of fucking transfers.
Right.
Hugh Freeze, for anybody that doesn't know, which I'm assuming, most of you guys do, but we'll just play a little game here. He was a former Ole Miss coach who had 27 wins vacated after a shit ton of recruiting violations that kind of went down, right?
That's right.
But he still had the Ole Miss Rebels competing for the SEC in the middle of Saban's dynasty, man.
So whoa. Was he the guy that had so this is, I'm gonna feel like a fucking idiot here because I should know more. Was he the dude a couple years ago when Ole Miss won like 4 games, came there, and then ended up having like the top like 3 recruiting class with like that was the DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, a couple of those God, who's a fucking stud on defense they recruited. They had like 5-star guys one year just all show up at the same time. Was it? I think that was him, wasn't it?
I believe so, if I'm not.
Okay, that was like a national headline. Like, how is all of a sudden this team that won 5 or 6 games a year before was not relevant at all? Sorry to interrupt you here, but this now that rings a bell. And it was like, we all know what DK Metcalf and fucking AJ Brown are in the NFL, and there was a couple of defensive fucking studs on that team.
There was a gentleman called Robert Ndici, I think, who was the number 1 defensive player. He was in my class. He played, football. I'm trying to think where he played for. He played high school football in Georgia, in the state of Georgia. We played him like in our last game as we got eradicated from the playoffs. But he was he was pretty good. He was like all consensus like number 1 defensive player in the country, and they ended up landing him.
I just know that team when it happened. It was multiple years ago or whatever. But I just remember hearing and paying attention to that. I can't remember who the heck. It's terrible. I don't remember the head coach. That was probably the reason why they were doing what they were doing. That sounds about fucking spot on, because it was like I just remember the whole national landscape was like, how in the fuck is this team like number 2 or 3 in recruiting and won 5? You know what I mean? So it was like something was going on. This is before they did the NIL thing, obviously, and this is when players were getting paid before players were getting paid, right? It was like, you don't just land AJ Brown and DK Metcalf in the same class, right? And they didn't really do a ton. I hate to say this, they didn't really do a ton with all that team anyway. They were relevant, but not what you would have thought compete for a national title with that ton of talent. And that's funny you say Robert Ndici or whatever you say his name. I know exactly what you're talking about.
They had Laramie Tunsil too. That that kind of kicked off a lot of that.
Yep. Yeah, that class was fucking loaded, dude. Loaded.
Please, dude. Yeah, he had them. I mean, he beat Bama, I think, one year, had them ranked like number 1 at one point, and then they lost, So here's the thing, though. I mean, at Liberty, he put together a 34-15 record over a 4-year period, right? So, I mean, he's got some positive things since then, kind of looking past the recruiting thing a bit there, But like we said, man, I mean, this Auburn team is going to look completely different from how they looked last year, which that's not a bad thing considering they went 5-7 last year.
Yeah.
So The offense is going to be led by Michigan State transfer Peyton Thorne, who had 2,700 yards and 20 touchdowns last year combined. Look, I think he's going to be a very middle of the road SEC quarterback. He could be a good bridge option this year for the Tigers. I want to see him break 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns this year. If you do that in the SEC, I think you'll be all right. I'm not saying you're going to be winning the SEC by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that you'll be much better than where you were last year. He's going to be looking over his shoulders, though, right? Because, they do have a dynamic athlete in Robbie Ashford, right, who's second. Believe it or not, this kid was a quarterback. He was second in rushing yards last year with 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. Look, I think if you kind of think about this, who Hugh Freeze had when he was at Liberty, he had Malik Willis, right? And we know what Malik Willis is and what he can do. So, this Robbie Ashford kid, he's young, and chances are they're going to try to groom him to become the next Malik Willis. And I think Hugh Freeze likes that. He's kind of saying, hey, just hold on for a year here. Just trust him, and good things are going to happen. To me, when I think of Auburn, dude, I think of really good running backs, though. They're kind of like right up there with Georgia. They just have some elite running backs there, dude. Tank Bigsby ended up leaving, though, so they're going to have Jarquez Hunter, who put up almost 900 all-purpose yards and 9 touchdowns. They also bring in USF, the Bulls, transfer Brian Batty. He had 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Really bright spot for a Bulls program that went 1-11. So, yeah, man. I really think it's going to be a situation where they're going to have to kind of look at doing some things. We look at the wide receiver room here. Jackson State transfer Shane Hooks is going to be coming in and returning leading receiver last year. Javarius Johnson is coming back. They also get another FIU transfer at the tight end spot who put up 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Offensively last year, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They were not very good. But also you look at who they've got. They've got a new quarterback, got a bunch of new offensive linemen, got a shit ton of new receivers. So it's kind of hard to really predict what do we think they're going to do, how they're going to gel together. Defensively, they do get back just about all of their secondary from last year, which is great. Dude, they finished 25th in team efficiency defense last year. So that secondary is going to be pretty good, which they need them to be because a lot of the front 7 is going to be brand new. They do bring back their second leading tackler, which was Cam Riley from last year. They also bring in another Ole Miss transfer. We were just done talking about them, and Austin Keys, an App State linebacker, Jalen McLeod, to kind of round out to round out that linebacking room for them. To me, the biggest question for the Tigers this year, Chris, is going to be on their defensive line. We've talked about this ad nauseum. You've got to be able to put pressure on a quarterback in order to kind of help your secondary out and to be able to affect the game and get them off target, especially with the new rules of college football where everything's a pass interference now.
Yeah, you said it best. I think this is where me and you get along so well, Christian, is like we're so big about the front 5 versus the fucking defensive front, right? We talk about this shit all the fucking time on air, off air, where teams all you gotta do is look at the top 10 teams, why they're there, how they got there. A lot of it starts up front. We all know that. You can have the best fucking quarterback in the country playing back there without an offensive line, he ain't doing shit, right? We all know this. You can have great people out at corner. If you don't have a fucking front 7 that ain't putting pressure on the ball, Christian, give those guys all day to fucking throw the ball. I don't care how fucking good you are. That's the big thing. Auburn this year, yeah, they're returning a shit ton of people, or excuse me, not returning a shit ton of people. They brought in a ton of people in. I guess I'm a big component. Also, I'll add this in on our resume as far as like what we think of teams. It's going to take some time to gel. Nobody just becomes good overnight. This is why I'm not that high on Nebraska this year. I'll talk about them for just a split second here because they're a perfect example. Matt Rule, new coach, new quarterback, Jeff Sims. Basically they're revamping their whole fucking defensive line this year and the back half. So like, I'm not saying 10, 11 wins for Nebraska. And this is what I say about Auburn. Man, were they like 2-6 in conference last year, if I'm not mistaken? That sucks. That's pretty fucking pitiful. I know it's the SEC. That's not good for Auburn. I know Auburn fans are like, yeah, that was fucking pathetic. I'm sure Auburn isn't happy about that. Excuse me. So I guess I'm kind of in the same mindset, Christian, is that like it's going to take some time here. I don't expect a ton out of Auburn this year. I think Auburn's been in that like limbo stage of like we really don't know what the fuck we are. Just kind of like Nebraska, kind of seems to change every other year. We don't really know what the fuck we're doing. That's where I'm at. In the defensive side of the ball is where they need to establish something. You said it perfectly. Start off the fucking pod here with this team. Running backs, Cadillac Williams, Kerryon Johnson. They haven't had a guy like that in a while. Bigsby's gone. He left, transferred. What are you guys going to do? Because they've always been kind of a smash mouth team, right? Cam Newton. You bring up guys like him. I mean, like I really don't know. I don't even think they know. Maybe they do now, but like previous, 3-4 years, I don't think they really know what the hell they are.
No, I mean, they've always kind of had, especially over the last few years with some of the different coaches they've had, they've always had like athletic quarterbacks. This right. Michigan State transfer, this is not
an athletic quarterback though.
No, I would not. That's what I was going to say. He's not an athletic quarterback. I mean, this kid is like a drop back, throw the ball on you. If you got to scramble, he's probably going to get sacked. I think he had like negative rushing yards last year.
Yeah, no, he's kind of I hate to say this. I'm not going to. This is so fucking bad, but like he's like Tom Brady in a way. He's a statue.
Yeah,
he doesn't move. Yeah. Like he doesn't move. I'm like I watched him play a ton of Michigan State, dude, and I was always like, man, when I heard he was transferring, I'm like, well, why? Like Michigan State kind of built their team around him, right? They run the football first, so I'm assuming Auburn is going to do that because you're not going to. And this is the SEC too, mind you. This is probably a tougher conference than the Big Ten.
Well, exactly. So you've got a very middle of the pack Big Ten quarterback coming to the SEC. Probably be, one of if he finishes inside of like the top half of quarterbacks, I'd be surprised. I mean, I would just say, I would be surprised. Honestly, dude, it's one of those things where why not just stay at Michigan State and keep doing your thing? I'm not trying to knock the kid. Obviously, you wanted to kind of go on to bigger pastures there, but still, Michigan State's no slouch either. They always have some surprise seasons every now and again. Right. I think the reality of it though, Chris, is look, dude, we've touched on it a lot. With a lot of transfers and a new coach, I think they're going to be better. But the hardest, to me, you come into the hardest conference in all of college football, and I just think that all of this kind of says they're a few years away from really competing for the SEC again. I really think that.
No, I don't have anything more to add to Auburn. I know we want to talk probably more about them, but I really don't have much more than like what we've just basically said. I think it comes down to the front line. Do they really they really don't have a dominant player? If Peyton Thorne is your big name transfer as far as QB play, I've seen so much of him, and I'm not knocking the guy, but like he ain't gonna. This team, like you said, if they finish in top half of the SEC, that's a fucking win. That's better than 2-6. I'll tell you that in conference. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. Well, you ready to jump in and see what their record's going to be this year, Chris?
Let's go. I'm going to let you go first here, though. I want to hear yours. You always make me go first, so I want to hear you this time.
All right. Let's take a look here. All right. So here's what I've got, dude. I'm just looking at it. I got them at 7-5 this year. I think they're going to have losses to Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Vandy. Yes, I said Vandy.
I know you're riding that Vandy dick wagon though.
Kind of am a little bit. I think it's and I'm even predicting a surprise upset loss or a surprise upset over Bama this year from Auburn.
Yeah. Okay. Let's pump the fucking brakes there. Let's grab a hold of that chode that you have over there and just calm down for a second. No, I think A&M is one I could substitute for fucking Vandy. That stretch is tough though. A&M, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say about where you're at. I would maybe even go a step below that and say 6-6. I just don't know what Auburn is, dude. I really don't have much. I don't think anybody really probably has much to base it off of. UMass, Cal might be. I hate God. It's a Pac-12 team. I do, Christian. I'm going to say 6-6. I really am, and hopefully I don't. We already got enough fan bases hating on us. Mr. Florida seems like you definitely don't like us. That's okay though. Well, I'm going to roll with 6-6, 7-5, right in there, dude. I really don't. I just don't see Auburn. Just doesn't like a team that like it just doesn't scare me. They don't have a lot of pieces where I'd be like see them on a schedule and be like, hey, we can't beat them. For majority of the fucking NCAA football teams, I hate to say that. Just being honest.
Hey, I get it. Look, we've talked about it in the past, and it's one of those things where, to me, I just think you look at Bama, they don't have a quarterback, dude. I mean, they've got three. They've got a running back.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they've got a running back in Milton. They've got another kid that's really young. They both struggled with accuracy. The receivers are dropping the frickin' ball. Auburn always plays Bama really, really tough. I mean, it's like it's kind of like the Ohio State Michigan game or one of those kind of games where it's like it can always be a toss up just depending. And I know Ohio State's kind of dominated Michigan in the past, but every year you still don't know what happens, and chances are it's going to be a close game going into the second half. So I just think depending on what happens, because it's going to be very late in the year, obviously last game of the year when they play. I think they could pull an upset. I mean, to me, Hugh Freeze is kind of that guy. I mean, he's kind of Saban's kryptonite, if you will. And I just don't think Bama's going to be as good as what people think. As far as the Florida gentleman that's saying that all we do is hate, pass the haterade, son, because I'm ready. I'm thirsty and I want some more of that haterade.
I love it. I'm not sure what that comment's supposed to mean. That's fine. That's not hating on Auburn this year. I don't want to go down. I could do this voice all day. I don't really know what I mean. I just don't. I think a lot. I mean, if you talk to general people that follow college football, I don't think anybody's putting Auburn in the top 50. Like I just don't see where. I mean, and somebody in the chat live stream, fucking on YouTube later on can tell me differently. I just don't see where they're relevant, dude. I hate to say that, but I mean, I just don't. I'm not scared of them. If I'm any team, I don't think they just don't have a ton of weapons, both sides of the ball. Like, kind of an average team. I think, I disagree with you a little bit, Christian. I think Bama's got better players at the QB position. We'll talk about that someday about Bama and what I really think about their quarterback play. But overall, man, Auburn just to me is just, I really don't think they're relevant.